from a legacy of debt, which this bill will give them. I yield back.
Mr. Kelly.
Excuse me, Mr. Kelly, you're recognized to speak on the amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. And we're speaking in opposition to the amendment, even though Mr. Bloom and I get along very well. And I understand where you're going with this, and I can appreciate that. And I think we've already talked about if we had that crystal ball to look into the future, we'd be able to say, hey, you know what? I think in 2 years it's not going to be good. In 4 years it's not going to be good. But unfortunately down here, we look at 10-year periods before we actually score things, and it makes it a little bit difficult. But let me just say what I want to speak on. One of the things we're leaving out is not about this tax bill or our belief of whether it's going to make Americans' lives better or it's money in the pocket of everyday American taxpayers. It's going to help out. And as it goes on, will we look at things that we said, boy, I wish I had done that differently. But the one thing I don't hear is our belief in the American people and their understanding of opportunity and their understanding of what's out there that I can actually act on and can make a better life for my wife, my children, my grandchildren, and future generations. We all agree that the status quo is not acceptable. We want to see things change. But I can tell you, from my experience, and I've heard Mr. Teaberry talk about this so many times, I will tell you about a guy who graduated from Westinghouse High School in 1936. In 1941, he had a job at a Chevrolet warehouse picking parts, and the girl he was dating at the time ran the telephone operator thing. They had to plug the lines in. He decided to join the war effort, and before he left to go to the war, he married the girl that was running the telephone. Those people happened to be my parents. My dad was one of 9. My dad was the first person in his family to ever own a car. And he got that car by working at the White Castle making hamburgers in the middle of the night. My father was in the fruit business. But what I'm talking about is the dynamic nature of the American people. When they see an opportunity, when they are given the option to fail or to accelerate their lives, to succeed, they always go towards success. There's not another nation in the history of the world that has seen the dramatic rise in the average person than right here in this country. It is who we are. We're not ours, we're not D's, we're we's. We are people who understand opportunity. We are people who understand that when I'm given the opportunity to pursue a dream, that I can do it. And unfortunately, where we are in our country right now, it's not foreign competition that hurts us. It's our own government that hurts us. We tax them too high, we regulate them too much, and then we criticize them when they say, I've got to go offshore to survive. Not to thrive, but to survive. This piece of legislation brings jobs back here to the United States of America, where Americans work. It doesn't drive them offshore. It increases the ability of every single American to have more money in her or his pocket to take care of their families. What in the world are we arguing about? I will never, ever give up on who this country is and who we are as a people. When America faces a problem, they don't turn and run from it. They stare it down and they find a way to work their way through it. It doesn't matter how the debt got there right now because it's already there. And I agree with Mr. Renacci. We're chasing a rabbit we can't catch. This is a revenue bill. It's not a spending bill. It is a revenue bill, and we're trying to figure out the revenue is provided by hard-working American taxpayers. It's not provided by some other entity. Isn't that who we should be working for? Not blue states or red states, but the United States. Shouldn't we be looking at every single citizen when we go home and say, we tried to lighten your load today, we tried to make sure that your future could be brighter, that your children's future can be brighter, and that you can have a more stable life going into your golden years. Because the only thing true about the golden years right now is you don't have a lot of gold, it's not going to be very golden. And we've taken that ability away from people because of the way we tax them and the way we regulate them. Can we please talk about rebuilding America, making America great again? Not for just the rich, but for every single American. My God, folks, that's what we're here for. We represent different parties, but it's all the same people. Those folks in our districts, I represent Pennsylvania's 3rd District, they're not all Republicans. Most of them are blue-collar Democrats. And they're looking at what we're doing and what we're not doing for them. So let's just stay on the message here, and let's make it a little better life for every single American. We can do it. We can do it. We've done it before. We can do it again.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Levin, you're recognized to speak on the amendment.
Well, I think it's good, Mr. Chairman, that we're bringing some passion into this, and the previous speaker speaks with passion, and so I hope you understand if we speak with passion. The purpose of this amendment is to spotlight what this is all about. It's been said that Mr. Bartholt talked about every group on average benefiting. But when you go beyond the averages, it's very clear that this is the opposite of a middle-class tax cut. The speaker said the focus is on middle-class tax relief. The focus is on directing the tax relief to the people in the middle and the people who are trying to get there. And that is why we put our emphasis on that tax relief for those people who are in the middle. When it comes to AMT, it's the opposite. When it comes to pass-through, it's the opposite. When it comes to the estate tax, as we discussed yesterday, it's the opposite. And as we have new data, it also shows as to the individual taxpayer, it's also the opposite. We asked yesterday for there to be a breakdown in terms of these income categories. And so this is what this breakdown shows. And I read this. In 2023, 24.6% of taxpayers between $75,000 and $100,000 will see a tax increase. In 2023, 20.1% of taxpayers between $50,000 and $75,000 will see a tax increase. In 2025, it gets worse. 26.7% of taxpayers between $75,000 and $100,000 will see a tax increase. In 2025, 21.4% of taxpayers between $50,000 and $75,000 will see a tax increase. That's why we feel so passionate. That's why we felt yesterday when there was an amendment provided that we had never seen before, we became passionate because all the facts have to be brought out. And what the speaker said in describing this was simply not true. And I want to just say one thing. This is a revenue bill. This is also a spending bill. Because when you increase the deficit, as you're doing, it will impact in terms of spending. And this is what the Republican budget did or proposed, citing the deficit. The budget would further cut $800 billion from non-defense discretionary spending while leaving the official defense budget alone. And I want to read this fact, that in 2023, the amount would be the lowest level of discretionary spending relative to GDP in more than a half a century. So essentially what the Republicans plan to do with this increase in deficit is begin to cut Medicaid more, Medicare more, education more, health care more, training more, as they propose in their budget. So this is a spending as well as a revenue bill. And when it comes to revenue, it's totally irresponsible. It's irresponsible. And the notion that it's basically for the middle class is untrue. It's untrue. I was taught as a kid not to use the word lie, so I'll use the word fib.
That's Irish.
It's Irish? I may have had an Irish ancestor. It's a fib. It's a big fib. And so don't say that Mr. Bartholt said on average everybody gets a benefit. And he didn't say everybody. On average people do. Because everybody doesn't, even those in some years according to the first table and now to the facts. So this amendment of Mr. Blumenauer says after 2 years, we need to take a look, right, Mr. Blumenauer? After 2 years, we need to take a look. And all the facts indicate that if this were ever to pass, and I don't think it will, it would be a miserable development, we need to take another look in 2 years.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Reed, you're recognized.